We are looking at session 6 of the dark forces that are reshaping our world, and we're going to continue to look at this. We have only just begun. We've looked at 2 Peter chapter 2 and Jude 6. I'll let you look those up on your own. Jesus did say that we were going to return to those days. We're looking at those days. But I want to look at Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 12 tonight, because the Apostle Paul characterized it this way. The struggle that we have now, and it has only increased since Paul's day, we don't wrestle against flesh and blood. That's a difficult thing to remember. It's not the flesh and blood of the stuff that we see around us that is our struggle, but it's against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Wherefore, take unto you the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. So Paul assumes that because of the assets that the Lord has made available to us, the whole armor of God, we will be able to stand. Now, this is good news, because sometimes it feels like we're being overwhelmed by the evil, but if we will take the whole armor of God, we will be able to stand. So we've been looking at the 3 key rebellions that we find in the Old Testament, because they are precursors, they are ghosts of the past that are going to come back, and the fall of mankind, obviously, in Genesis chapter 3, but we're looking intently at Genesis chapter 6. And among other things, the enemy's goal with Nimrod and the Tower of Babel was to break the messianic bloodline, corrupt humanity, and institute the giants breeding program. That's Genesis 6 with the flood and Noah. I'm sorry, not Nimrod and the Tower of Babel. We'll look at that when we get to Genesis chapter 11. So, have you heard of the history of that trigger phrase, conspiracy theory? It gets thrown all around a lot. We all use that. We thought conspiracy theorists were nuts. We now know that conspiracy theories, as they come to us, now we know they're actually just heads up on what's actually coming. They're not theoretical anymore. But a lot of people online have been saying that the phrase conspiracy theory was started by the CIA, and that's not the case. Up until this time, 1964, 1967, when the CIA began to use it, it was hardly ever mentioned in print. But once the CIA put it out there and planted it in the press, then it has exploded and has become a slur. But so y'all know what the Warren Commission was. So when Kennedy was assassinated, Congress called for, and the president called for, the Warren Commission to be put together and to investigate who actually did it and what was involved in all that. Accusations were getting thrown around. The CIA did it. The Republican operatives did it. The mafia was probably the key theory that got thrown around that killed Kennedy. And so the Warren Commission did all their research and put it to Congress. That was in 1964. By 1967, the CIA had begun to try to counter them getting blamed more than anything else for it. And so they put it out there. Anybody who doesn't believe that Oswald, the assassin, acted on his own, anybody who doesn't believe that is just a conspiracy theorist. That's when it began to be a slur and a negative. But in fact, conspiracy theory is actually a term and a phrase used in law enforcement. It was before that, and it continues to this day. That's what law enforcement, when a crime happens, in order to figure out what happened, if they don't have enough evidence to put together a theory, they will postulate a theory of what it looks like could have happened. And then they will begin to amass all the evidence and all the information to either prove or disprove that theory. And if that theory is disproved, then they have to come up with another theory and prove or disprove that. It's actually a good, it's almost the way science works. A doctor's degree, you put forth a theory, if you will, and then you put together all the evidence for or against that, and whatever comes out the other side, that's what truth is. So conspiracy theory is not actually a negative, but our CIA turned it into a negative. And I showed you this visual to picture what's going on in the world today. We've talked a lot about, we're going to talk less about what's above the water and more about what is below the water, the dark forces that are shaping things. So the things that we can see, and I just ripped this off from Jonathan Brentner. You can find it at Harbinger's Daily, a great place to find current news from a prophetic and a biblical standpoint. Jonathan Brentner is a great guy, and you can go to his website. I just ripped this off from him because he already did it. We've talked about this and other things as well. The rebirth of Israel was a big deal in 1948, the biggest deal. A nation that has been scattered among the nations has been rebirthed. In 1948, a nation was born again. And that has never happened before. And so that was what Jesus said would happen. He said, when you see the fruit coming out on the tree, you know it's time. So we're in the end of the end ages simply because of that. The third temple fever, y'all know that they've already got the utensils ready, training priests to do the sacrifices, and they've got the red heifers. What are there? How many of them are there? 5 that have made it down there. The last contestants that they might be the lucky one to have their throat cut. But there'll only be one in the end, and they will begin to be able to have the ashes from that burnt red heifer sacrifice that they can be able to put in water and basically make it holy water, where they will be able to anoint temple instruments, priests, and everything associated so they can restart sacrifices. And that's just, so here are all 12 of them. The only one I'm not on board for is number 10. The North and South Pole shift. We don't know about that. That's just, I don't know why he even put that in there. That's so far out there. But we are seeing all of these other things coming to pass. I mean, the 666 technology, that's right there. It's not even, you don't even have to have any imagination to see how that's going to come to pass. COVID-19 has brought it to the forefront where we're seeing that they're able to, well, and so the digital health passports, that's the latest one that ties in with that as well. The World Health Organization is putting together so that they can digitize everybody, and you don't have to have a passport in order to travel outside your country. So my response to that is I'm not going outside the United States, but that's not going to fix the problem. Transhumanism, one world government, I'm encouraged that I'm not the only one seeing this. In fact, I don't know how you would not see it. You would not see it because you don't want to see it. Right? And I was talking earlier, the seminaries are training the preachers, have for decades now, that nobody knows anything about prophecy. Nobody can know anything about prophecy. So just don't ever talk about it. And so as the preachers go, so go the churches. Right? And so by and large, the majority of churches, and sadly, even among Southern Baptists, I've had friends that were in the ministry among Southern Baptists that they would look at discussions that we have with them and teachings that I would do, and they would say, "Oh, you're just so gifted at that, and you just know so much about that, and I just can't do that in my church because I don't get it the way you get it." Listen, just open your Bible and read it, dig it out. Anybody with a 6th grade education can probably do it. But I think maybe some people are overwhelmed And they've been told you can't understand anything about prophecy, so they don't even try. And that's sad, and that's of the devil. That's his intent. So we can see all of this, and there's more than these 12 things above the water. The World Economic Forum, all the things shaping up with the latest pandemic. But there are many things in the shadows, and they've always been in the shadows, and they've always been in the background, but they're the driving forces. I've just listed a few of them. Freemasonry. A guy by the name of Albert Pike kind of wrote the book for Freemasonry back in the 1800s. I was reading him today, and he said, we use words like we say we have a God, and all the Christians will get on board with, oh, we're talking about God, right? But he went on, he said, now we only reveal to the 30th, 31st, and 32nd degree who we're really talking about. He went on, he said, who we're really talking about is Lucifer. Lucifer is the god of light and the god of good. Adonai is the god of darkness and evil. Now, do you know who Adonai is? That's Yahweh. That's the God that you and I. But they use the term. They use the word God, and we insert Yahweh there. But who they actually mean, if you're at the 30, 31st, and 32nd degree, you can actually know the secrets. So my point is, it's a secret society. They developed it as a secret society. Only when you get to certain levels do you get to know certain secrets. And the higher you go, the more the secrets you know. That's just one. There's the Illuminati, the Order of Skull and Bones. You remember George Bush? But yeah, yeah. Several of our presidents have been a part of that. Knights Templar, Opus Dei. Luciferians is a group, but it's kind of a broader term that over all of it. Lucifer is orchestrating it, basically what it comes down to. But there's an actual group who are Luciferians. The Council on Foreign Relations. Now, and so I'm not a conspiracy theorist that I'm telling you these are secret organizations. They say they're secret organizations. Now you might get invited to the Council on Foreign Relations, but their meetings are secret. The press doesn't get to come. Bilderbergers, and the latest one is the Swamp. But that swamp is a real thing, and it's made up of Democrats and Republicans alike. And they are in that smoke-filled room in the background, and they're the ones that are deciding things. The latest debt limit thing, if you don't see the hand of the devil of the swamp all over that, you're not looking. So I just remind you what I showed you last week. There is hope. If you will, as Paul said, take the whole armor of God, you will be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. So we've been talking about this second attack, this incursion of these fallen angels, as they're called in Genesis chapter 6. We all know about Noah's flood. We've read about it a lot. Noah's flood, where the sons of God took the daughters of men, whomsoever they would, whoever they wanted to. They took those women, had relations with them, and the result of that were Nephilim and giants and those sort of things. We talked about that last week as well. I want to take you to something interesting. In Enoch chapter 7, so Enoch is one of those mysterious books that the church had removed because they didn't want you to know the information. Actually, no. You can get a copy of the book of Enoch. We're going to read about it right now online. You can get the book of Enoch and you can read it. And as Michael Heiser has said, these books are not canon. The book of Enoch is not canon, but there's value in knowing what's in the book of Enoch, as there is in other books that are, because he says, and he's absolutely right, you find out what was in the mind of the ancients at the time that the books of the canon, like Genesis and so forth, were written. That was in the back of their mind. They knew those books. They studied those books. And so knowing what they knew gives you a leg up on interpreting the things that we find in the canon. Case in point, Enoch chapter 7. So here's what we find in Enoch chapter 7 and verse 1. So remember, this was written apparently at the time after the flood, and gives us a little bit of an idea, sort of an expanse on what we find in Genesis 6. These each chose a woman and were defiled with them. The women became pregnant and bore large giants who were extremely tall. The angels begat giants, the giants begat Nephilim, and the Nephilim begat, nobody knows what an Eliad is, but it was one of these things. One of these Eliad is supposed to be really versed in knowledge that humans are not supposed to have, and they're really powerful, capable beings, for whatever it's worth. So this just kind of dovetails with what we find in Genesis 6. It's very much like it. Now, the difference, I'm told, I haven't read all of the book of Enoch, but in some of the ancient Mesopotamian writings that also mirror this, the Nephilim and the giants are the good guys. Okay? When we come over to Genesis chapter 6, they're the bad guys. So that's why we have scant information. All the writer of Genesis chapter 6 is doing is saying, okay, here's the truth. 2 or 3 verses, they're the bad guys. They're not the good guys. Now, that tells us something we need to know about when Jesus said, as it was in the days of Noah, so will it be in the days of the Son of Man's return. So these are bad guys, and they're coming back. That's all. That's what we need to know about that. A sidebar. In Daniel chapter 9, verse 26, it tells us that the Messiah will be cut off. It's a wonderful way that God revealed it to Daniel. And the Messiah would be cut off. And not for his people, not for himself. That's how he would be cut off, but not for himself. Well, if he wasn't cut off for himself, who was he cut off for? Me. He was cut off for me. He was crucified on the cross. He was literally raised from the ground, cut off from the earth physically. This is a spiritual truth, but physically he was cut off from the land for me, not for himself. But it goes on. That particular word that's used there in Daniel is karat. And it is used for the first time. You know the principle of first mention. When a thing is first mentioned in the Bible, that highlights what that's going to be about through the rest of the Bible. So the first mention of it in the mind of the ancients, they would have understood the first time, they would have understood this principle of first mention. And they would have been instantly taken back to Genesis 9:11, for mankind being cut off by the flood. So the flood cut off mankind. The context of believers' baptism connects back to the flood. That's the whole point. The flood was all about water, the cutting off of humanity because of sin. But baptism is kind of a reconnection, if you will. Simply stated, humanity was cut off by judgment, water, and that was reversed by Messiah's death, burial, and resurrection, and we symbolize that with water. What a wonderful accident that God decided to use water to symbolize the reversal of what he did in Genesis chapter 6. Of course, who believes in circumstances? Who believes in luck? Who believes God's in charge of everything? So Adam and Shem and Abraham, this all the way comes to Jesus, and Jesus on the cross reversed. We picture that with water baptism, what was done in the flood in Genesis chapter 6. Maybe you're not impressed by that. I think it's amazing that God was orchestrating the flood and Christian baptism so that we could see this visual if you will. I told you the reason why I do the children's sermon with an object lesson is because our God is the God of the giant sweeping object lessons. Another sidebar. Who doesn't like to chase after Bigfoot? We all do now that we believe that maybe he is. Anyway, there's an odd story that maybe connects with this, a sighting, if you will. In Genesis chapter 36, verse 24. These are the children of Zibeon, both Ajah and Anna. And note that, Anna, who's we're going to focus on. This is that Anna, evidently. There were other people named by that. It was a common name at the time, evidently. This was that Anna, Genesis 36:24 tells us, that found the mules. Now, that word mules there is very interesting. It doesn't mean mules. We don't know what it means. It's a word that's been lost. We don't know what it means. The Hebrew word is yami. Yami. At any rate, Anna, whatever these things are, whatever these yamin are, he found them in the wilderness as he fed the asses of Zibeon, his father. Okay, so get the picture. Anna has taken his father's asses out into the wilderness to feed them. And while he's out there, he finds these yami, whatever they are. So there's what is this yami? What are yami? Maybe we can kind of figure this out. There's a 16th century Jewish Targum. Now that's a commentary. That's an opinion of the rabbis. But since we don't have anything else, the rabbis are maybe giving us information that we don't have anyplace else, but they have access to ancient information. Anyway, this Jewish Targum so the commentary opinion of the rabbis on Genesis 36:24, we can find expanded in Jasher 36:28. So Jasher 36, let's see what verse 28 tells us. Now, if you stick with me, I think you're going to find something very interesting. So Anna took his father's asses out into the wilderness, Genesis tells us, to feed them. And while he was out there, he came across this yami. What's a yami? Jasher, look at verse 28. And the sons of Shobal were Alvan, Manasseh, Ebal, Shephah, Oman. The sons of Zibeon were Ajah and Anna. This was that Anna who found the yamin in the wilderness when he fed the asses of Zibeon, his father. Okay, so we've got a correlation here now between what the scripture says and what we find in the book of Jasher. Verse 29. And whilst he was feeding his father's asses, he led them to the wilderness at different times to feed them. And there was a day, that was a particular day, that he brought them to one of the deserts on the seashore, opposite the wilderness of the people. And whilst he was feeding them, behold, a very heavy storm came from the other side of the sea and rested upon the asses that were feeding there, and they all stood still. Okay, so get the picture. You've got these asses. A storm blows up, and it's pretty normal. They will all kind of congregate together. Cattle will do the same thing. They'll all kind of come together and just hunker down while the storm comes through. And they all stood still. Now it gets interesting. And afterward, about 120 great and terrible animals came out from the wilderness on the other side of the sea. And they all came to the place where the asses were, and they placed themselves there. So we've already been told that he found the yamin, so that's what we're talking about here. They placed themselves there with those asses as the storm goes over. Verse 32. And those animals from their middle downward. So we get a description from Jasher of what a Yamin looks like. These animals from their middle downward were in the shape of children of men. Okay, so they had the appearance of a man, and from the middle upward, some had the likeness of bears, and some the likeness of kephas, and nobody knows what that is, with tails behind them from between their shoulders reaching down to the earth. From the tails of whatever that thing is, Dukafath, and these animals came and mounted and rode upon these asses and led them away, and they went away unto this day. So they ripped off all these asses. And one of these animals approached Anah and smote him with his tail, and then fled from that place. And when he saw this work, he was exceedingly afraid of his life, and he fled and escaped to the city. So whatever this tail was, it's not like a horse's tail. You get slapped in the face with a horse's tail, and you're not going to think you're going to be in danger of dying. So think dinosaur tail, something substantial enough that you're afraid it was going to kill you. And so he escaped to the city, went home. And he related to his sons and brothers all that had happened to him. And many men went to seek the asses, but they could not find them. And Anah and his brothers went no more to that place from that day following, for they were greatly afraid of their lives. Interesting. Interesting. So evidently, a yamin is not a mule. Not know for sure what it is, but if we have a description here, we have a Nephilim appearance in Genesis 36. The Nephilim were back. All right, questions. Genesis 36 is where we began, that talked about Anah taking the ashes into the wilderness. And that dovetails with the expanded version in Jasher. Yeah. It was chapter 36, verse 28 through 35. And you can go find the book of Jasher. And so Jasher is one of those books that Jasher didn't write. That's the reason why they didn't wind up in the Bible. They were not considered canon because they were written and rewritten and added to, and somebody who said they were Jasher who wasn't actually Jasher. But you get the handed down tradition opinions about some things that you don't get anyplace else. That's the value of it to me. So, lacking any other information, this just gives us an interesting Bigfoot appearance, trying to be funny about it. So I point to this because the days of Noah that Jesus talked about, I believe, will be characterized by genetic manipulation or enhancement. So what we see, here's my point. What we see in reading about the Nephilim in the flood, the giants, and what we read about that maybe is so with these Yamin, the descendants of the giants, I believe the devil in these days of Noah, the thing that's days of Noah about it may be not so much that the fallen angels are going to continue to have sex with women, maybe, but maybe the devil is going to take it to transhumanism 2.0. See, that's what he was trying to do in Genesis. He was trying to take humanism to the next level. That is, he was cohabiting, the fallen angels were cohabiting with women, and the results were these next generation humans, if I could use that term. We think about transhumanism as a brand new thing, but what if it's just going to be a refined thing? And the devil's going to be able to do it by way of all the different genetic manipulation and the enhancements that we can do. We already know much of it. It's just interesting to think about because these days are coming back, Jesus said. The incursion in Genesis 6 was about the sons of God and the daughters of men, but may come back in our day as variations of that attempt. Yeah, we're going to talk about aliens a bit more. Uh, we won't have time. It's already 8 o'clock. We won't do it tonight. But we are going to talk about aliens because we're seeing some things coming. So, just to pull a figure out of the air the way a liberal does, 99% of aliens and all of that can be explained away. Crop circles, right? It can be explained away. We already know there's people who have come forward and say, yeah, we did that, and here's how we did it. And they have video of them making the crop circles. Okay? But not all of it. Not all of them. In fact, there are some of the crop circles, I'll just give you a teaser. There are some of the crop circles that have actually been investigated on a scientific level by universities. And what they've discovered in some of these, now I don't know whether it's a half of 1% of what it is, it's a minority. But in this minority, we can't explain it. There are things going on, for example, the crops seem to have been seared, not completely burned up, but seared in such a way that these scientists from universities say, yeah, the only way you can do that is with intense heat of the level of thermonuclear explosion. There was no thermonuclear explosion because the ground wasn't burned, the stuff wasn't burned up. There's no evidence. But that's what it took to do what it did to those things that were the plants that were knocked down. Additionally, looking at them under a microscope, they see that the joints in corn has joints, right? These joints are elongated in an abnormal way, not like the rest of the corn around them. I just throw that out to you to tell you that aliens is a real thing. The aliens are not from Mars, right? But I believe that they are a real thing, that the devil is all over and is going to be using it to trick humanity. We've talked about this quite a bit. I gave you the famous quote from when the press asked the Vatican, if aliens come to Earth, will they have to become Catholics? And their response was, after they thought about it and talked about it, they came back and their response was, when the aliens come, not if, when the aliens come, they will show us the way. There are dark forces that are of the devil. There are not people living on planets millions of light years from here. I don't think. I've never actually been there. But that's not what the aliens that are going on right now are all about. There are other unexplainable things that can only be explained by something real. We'll talk about that.